Ones that are successful loved what they did so they could persevere. So you got to love it. You got to have passion.
Today I've got Spencer Hosking. He's a mindset coach, very exciting. He's got a lot to share and I want to bring him in so he can give us a lot of value and we're going to unpack it. Spencer, welcome, buddy. It's been a long time. Bring us up to speed.
Hey, man. How you been?
Good. It's been a while. Probably I think a year at this point since we've seen each other.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's been a while. We talked back when we were doing the Web3 stuff. And I don't think much came of it back then, but we stayed in contact for a long time and here we are.
Absolutely, man. And it seems like a lot's changed on your end. From what I can tell, you've kind of shifted gears. It seems like you're, raising your frequency these days, which I think is amazing. All the stuff that you've been up to and that I've seen you do on social media is incredible. But for those watching and that might not be familiar, just give us a little bit of a taste of what you've been doing recently and what's been going on.
Yeah, man. So basically, I'm a mindset coach for entrepreneurs, helping them to elevate their social circles and relationships. So I've struggled a lot with relationships in the past and just with a lot of mindset issues and traumas and limiting beliefs and things like that. And I've pretty much spent the last 5 years of my life just dedicating to learning all of this kind of stuff and teaching it to other people. And so now I've created a proper coaching business out of it to help entrepreneurs overcome those limiting beliefs and create meaningful relationships in their life just by using their mindset.
That's amazing. And I feel like, especially in the world that we're in today, a lot of people can benefit from that sort of thing. But was there a specific moment or a situation, because you mentioned some traumas and relationship issues in the past, was there like an aha moment where you're like, okay, I'm done repeating the pattern, something has to change? And what was that moment?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up learning social skills kind of by force. It wasn't really something that came naturally to me. And so my social life was kind of lacking. And so I built that up and built those skills up just by going and meeting people like out on the street and talking to as many people as I could, hundreds of people every night, living out in Las Vegas when there's a big flow of traffic. And I basically built up a really big social circle. I was throwing these massive parties every night with, hundreds of girls. And it was just like, it was a great time. It was awesome. And I basically felt like I was on top of the world, like I had this big ego boost, this big confidence and validation from that. And that was kind of my point where I realized, this is like, I'm at the top of a peak here, and I kind of fell off. And basically from there, I was seeking the validation, and that caused me to fall. And I fell down pretty hard after that. And I got to some really bad relationships. I ended up getting divorced from my wife I was with for a short amount of time out in Vegas.
Back up, by the way, just because I'm looking at you and I'm like, man, this guy looks pretty young. I know you got the beard now, but you're not. Yeah, you look really young. Okay, so how old were you when that happened?
I was about 21. Yeah. Wow. So super young. I was basically living in America where I couldn't work. I was on a visa that didn't allow me to work. I moved there when I was younger. I spent 10 years there living with my parents. And then COVID hit. And COVID hit and basically put my whole family out of work. We didn't have any unemployment benefits and no savings. And we basically were homeless. And I just spent all of my time working online. And I just grinded it out online, making as much money as I could, making YouTube videos and live streaming. And that kind of paid the bills. And I was able to get a roof over my girlfriend's head, over my sister's head, and eventually save up enough money to get a flight back to Australia, because the flights at the time during COVID were all booked out. They were 10 grand each. There was no way to get a flight. It was crazy. Yeah. So we basically saved up enough money for that. And then I took a flight back to Australia after that big fall. And I was like, okay, this is the time. I'm getting my shit together now.
Yeah.
There's no going back. I was homeless. I was broke. I was divorced. I lost all my friends, my fake friends. And it was like, okay, this is the tipping point.
I mean, it really sounds like you had every reason to literally quit and give up right there and then, like so many people probably would. So you get to this point, obviously, it was probably a steady path downwards, I would almost say, like a spiral that almost probably felt like you couldn't get out of, and just like everything seems to be going wrong. Seems like nothing can possibly go right. So when this moment happens, where did you turn to? What caught your attention? And what was sort of the shovel that got you to dig out of this mess? Because it sounds like a pretty big, but, deep hole that you were in at this point.
Definitely. I mean, living out in Vegas, it's like there's vices everywhere. So it was like the drinking, the drugs, the women. It was like relentless, man. And so and that spiraled me down, down, down really far. I was super depressed, super anxious, and super broke. And I just remember sitting in this car with all of my stuff all packed in the back, not having anywhere to go. And I was just like, I'm never going to let this happen again. Like, this is the last time that any of this is going to happen to me or anyone that I love. And I was like, okay, this is the rock bottom. This is the point where I spiral back up again. And I basically spent the next 2 years of my life just trying to create a blueprint that would allow me to get back up to that state of joy and love and peace that I was at before as quickly as possible, so that I could teach other people how to do it as well.
So what was the first step in the way that you started to kind of sort of head into the right direction after all these things sort of start to happen? Like, what was the first move? What was the first sort of, spot on the blueprint that you're like, okay, I got to go with that first?
It was just tapping in to what I knew I had to do that whole time. Because years before, I was thinking, my visa is about to expire in America. I have to leave here anyway. And I was just resisting it. I kept resisting what I knew I had to do, which was move back to Australia. And I put it off to the last minute, till a week before my visa expired. And I was like, okay, we just got to do it. And so I booked a flight. And I had just broken up with my girlfriend, and I booked a flight to Australia. And then 3 days later, I was on it, moved to Australia with 2 suitcases, nothing but $40 in my bank account, no plan. But I knew that was the route that I had to take. That was the action that I had to take, because my mind kept telling me, my intuition, my subconscious kept indicating to do that. And that was what I followed. From there on, it was that voice inside of my head that tells me what's the most important thing you can do right now. I just kept following that and kept following that. And it just kept spiraling me upwards, more and more, to the point where now I got, the dream car I want, the dream girl I want, the dream apartment I want, like dream job and businesses I want. And I built all that up over the course of probably about a year, maybe even 6 months, just from following that process, following my inner guidance system.
Right. So what is part of that process? So I think all of us, as we grow up, I think when we're born and as we're kids, we sort of have that guiding force, that intuition, that voice. And, there's many times, at least in my life, and I'm sure in your life, where we're doing things, we're like, man, this doesn't feel right. And we know it doesn't feel right. And a part of us actually almost internally has the answer of what it is that we should be doing. But of course, like you said, you have to almost hit that breaking point before you can take action and start to follow that path. So now that you finally make it back to Australia, which was a challenge on its own, and it's crazy, because I feel that having the answers, which is something that I would say you probably started to have when you started listening to the voice, but then getting the actual energy to head in the direction of the path that you went on, how did you cultivate that? Because I think that's a challenge a lot of people have with.
Yeah, definitely. People struggle with the motivation. And my clients, the same thing. They always come to me saying, I know what I have to do, but I don't have the motivation to do it. And I tell them, fuck motivation. What are you even talking about? Like, it's discipline over motivation. Like, you don't need motivation to do anything. When you know exactly what you need to do, and then you set up systems in your life to make sure that you create habits that it just gets done automatically, then you don't even have to think about it, and you don't need motivation or energy. So that's what I did, is I created systems for everything. And so I looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, the triangle, and I was like, okay, I'm at the very bottom right now. Like, I don't even have my physiological needs met as a human. I got to start out there. And so I built a whole blueprint to get my needs met at the highest level possible. So I started out at the bottom and I worked my way up, getting the safety needs met of food, clothing, housing, and then social needs met of friends and family and spouse and all of that. Then esteem and freedom. And it just kept going up and up until the point where it's like, transcendence and spirituality, which is kind of my domain now. But it's that process of figuring out, okay, where am I lacking? And what are the action steps that I can take to get there? So it's like, I didn't have my own place. I didn't have an apartment. So it's like, I'm going to go and get that. Okay, cool, done. What's next? I don't have a social circle of people who I have things in common with, people with common interests. Okay, bam, created that. Didn't have the relationship I wanted. Okay, put a plan together to get that. Bam, got it. And so it's just a logical process of like, okay, what do I logically need as a human, and how can I get it as quickly as possible?
Right. So it's good that you had the sequence and steps sort of mapped out. But the thing is, and I feel like, at least for me, I can speak for myself, and maybe this relates to your journey too. Sometimes when you get the idea, it's almost like the universe hears you and it says, yeah, motherfucker, that's what you want to do? Okay, cool. And then it starts to throw shit at you even more than before. Did that sort of stuff start to happen as soon as you started to kind of head on this path?
Yeah, relentlessly, man. And it's still happening today. It still happens every single day. When I wake up, there's always a challenge. There's always something that I'm facing that day. And it's in that moment that you have to choose, well, am I going to see this as a negative, as an obstacle in my path, or am I going to see it as a chance for me to grow and learn and get better? And every single moment of your life is like that. So if you just choose to be positive and look at everything from a positive light, then you're good. You just frame everything. I just reframe everything in my life in a point of view it's happening for me, right? It happens for me to teach me a lesson. And that's the next paradigm up from to me, right? Most people are stuck in to me. They're like, oh, everything's happening to me. This stuff's happening to me. Oh my God. Oh, it's so terrible. The next level up is for me. Things are happening for me. You know, it's teaching me something. And then there's another level above that, which is through me and then as me. But these are...
Okay, no. I like what you're saying. So it almost sounds like there's this sort of pyramid of understanding and consciousness. And I know that you're spiritual and shit. Before we get deeper into that, because by the way, I love that stuff. I think the world needs more of it. I find it super interesting. And it's almost funny when you meet people, you can kind of tell who has it and who doesn't. You know, some people don't even have any sort of consciousness to them. And you're just like, okay, I'm going to be a low level human with you just so we can sort of interact. And then other people, you can go into stuff like this, which is cool. But okay, was this something that you sort of grew up with? Was this always something you had inside of you, this sort of extra sense, this spirituality, or is this something that developed through hardship and problems?
Yeah. I mean, definitely didn't have it. Growing up, like I didn't have this at all. And I was I was a big atheist, right? And I'd always be like super skeptical about everything. And I'd be like, no, that's stupid. Like, it's just logic. It's logic over that. And eventually I got to the point where I realized that the most logical thing is a spiritual path, is opening your mind up to these concepts that are actually benefiting people that have different point of views from you, right? And so there's a way to look at all of it and look at every religion and look at every belief from a higher point of view that incorporates everything, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like one or the other. It's not like, oh, it's this religion or that religion. It's like they all just teach something, which is putting your mind in a better position, in a better state. So it's all just logic at the end of the day, but it's about learning that. So it's not learning. It's not like I learned or it's not like I had it inside of me beforehand. It was kind of like I went through all this stuff and it taught me the lessons, right? To get
that you needed to learn, and that sort of evolved you as a being, and at the same time raised your level of consciousness. And then it seems like as you started to go through these steps, you started to gain a better understanding of the people that you would interact with and probably even the world around you. So, okay, so we got through that part. And so what then made you want to get into the business that you're now in? Because this is very different from where you were at a year ago. I mean, we were having a very, very different kind of conversation back then, but man, this is awesome. I love it. And I want people to know about it. And I think the world needs it. So what's different about what you're doing versus what others might be doing? Because there's people in the space and, you know, you want to stand out.
Yeah, man. I mean, I got a job in Web3. I got a job in the Web3 industry. And it taught me a lot about how you can't be in a win-lose frame at all. You can't be in a competitive frame of mind because it reduces you, right? So I was working for a company that wasn't actually providing much value to people. And I learned that when it went under and when it tanked, that taught me a really valuable lesson of, okay, you have to be in win-win. You have to be thinking win-win and collaborative. Otherwise, you don't get anything yourself. You don't get anywhere yourself. You have to help other people in order to help yourself. So it was just a matter of realizing, okay, I've solved these problems for myself. I've built social circles for myself, amazing groups of people. I've built amazing relationships, and I've fixed my mind in a lot of ways and raised that level of consciousness. So it's my duty now to teach that to other people.
Okay, and what are some of the things that you're able to, and obviously without giving the secret sauce away, but like what are some of the key things that somebody listening or watching can pick up and kind of think, okay, that's a good step in the right direction. I see what he's saying, and there's probably more to this.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'll give away the secret sauce. I don't care, because what I do is accountability. I show people the exact places that they're kind of messing up, their bottlenecks, and then I hold them accountable to solve them and put action plans into place for it. So it's a really personalized thing. But the biggest thing I would say that people need to understand about their minds is that it's all mind over matter. It's literally all mind over matter. Anything that you think is a physical process that has an effect on you and how you react, it's not true. You can control all of that just by changing your mindset and changing your beliefs. Because if you have the belief that you can't do something, then you're not even going to try. You're not even going to actually believe that it's possible. So you're not going to actually do it, right? So there's limiting beliefs that everyone has, and I have as well, that we're constantly evolving out of. And it's just a matter of getting more awareness around those so that you can recognize them and let go of them.
Okay. So what I'm taking away from that, and I like that you said that, because obviously, we're born into this world. And I think, for the most part, when we're born as kids, it's kind of like a blank slate. It's an empty canvas, right? Because we haven't received any input from the external world. So it's just really a game of genetics. And obviously there's some randomness to that. But beyond that, everything is taught to us and told to us. And, I feel like a lot of that programming is done at an age and in a way where when we grow up, we don't even understand half the shit that we're actually doing. We're just doing things almost on autopilot in some sense. And that's the interesting part, because if you actually sit down with some people and kind of get to know their mind frame and how they see things, you could almost map out a trajectory of where they're going to go or where they're not going to go in their life. So I think what you're saying is important, because you have to self-analyze, unpack the shit that's in there, and start to look at the behaviors, actions, and the reasons why you do the things that you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. It's like people, when they're first born, a baby has no real idea of these concepts that we interact with and that we talk about. And these concepts are just that, they're concepts. So when we create these concepts, we're basically dividing up the world into different objects, right? It's like a constellation. You look at the constellations in the sky and you say, oh, that's the Sagittarius constellation. There it is. But in reality, they're just galaxies and stars that are millions of miles apart and have no correlation to each other whatsoever. That's the same as every concept that we've ever learned. The concept of the self, the concept of time, the concept of this pen, any object is actually just a part of the whole that we are dissecting into different areas, right? And so what I teach and what meditation teaches, and a lot of these teachers kind of teach the same thing, which is just getting back in touch with that childlike, that baby-like state that's just joy, that's just bliss, that's just connected to everything else and everyone else. Because that's really how you get success with people, with relationships, even with money. It's all just about connecting back to everything else around you and realizing that it's not even separate in the first place.
What do you mean when you say that those different individual areas, that when we're in waking life, like money, relationships, getting to know ourselves, stuff like that's actually part of one larger sort of connection, that they're not separate in their own ways? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients will come in and they'll either be too much in their own head, so they won't be able to relate to people, or they'll be too focused on the other person and what they think, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's about bringing that balance back into the middle and realizing that when you help other people, you in turn get helped. And when you're grounded in your own being, then you can help other people more, right? When you help yourself, you help other people. And when you help other people, you help yourself. And that's just a law of the universe. This is a universal law of the universe that is, you can't contradict it, right? There's no way to contradict this law. And so that's what my teachings entail, is just teaching these universal laws to people who don't understand them. Because once you understand the ways that the universe actually operates and works, then you can manifest things, right? Manifest.
Yeah.
You can get things. You can do what you want more effortlessly. It's not about trying to do things. It's about letting the things that you know you need to do just happen automatically without any inner resistance to it.
You know what I like about what you just said? So you mentioned you've got some people that are too internally focused and sort of all about themselves. And then you have people, and there's a lot of these people, by the way, the ones that are sort of too focused on others. And I find that interesting because the world almost seems like it's broken down into two types of people. You got the givers and you got the takers. But the problem is when you're too extreme on either side, there's no balance. And from what I understand, the universe, reality, social interactions, and beyond, you need balance. And so tell me more about the relationship stuff, if you don't mind, obviously. But I think it's all sort of connected to the bigger picture because you said all these pieces and parts actually make up a larger image in a puzzle. So I'm wondering, which one of those people were you?
Yeah.
You had to pick.
I've been through both. So you kind of go through cycles when you work on this stuff. Is like I started out really being in my own head. I just play video games all day. I'd just be on the computer and I'd have no social skills. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, that needs to change. And so the pendulum swung back the other way to where I was just too focused on other people and I lost my sense of self. I was going around and just making a fool of myself. And then I realized that I need to balance. I need both. So I need to worry about other people, but I also need to be grounded in myself to be able to even help other people in the first place. Right?
Absolutely.
So I've been through both, and most people go through both phases.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of this has to do with the types of people that, you know, and I say this because I think you have people that either have boundaries and don't have boundaries, and then the reasons why some of them may have boundaries and why, like some people have really strong boundaries, others don't have boundaries with others, and then others don't have boundaries with themselves. And if you break that sort of down, it sort of gets you into a place where it takes you back to that person's inner child, what their life was like possibly growing up. And then if you start to pick that apart, you have a better understanding of why these specific people sort of behave in the ways that they do, you know?
Yeah.
So I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. And looking back at my own childhood as well, it's like, you know, my parents were alcoholics and I grew up around a lot of drugs and there wasn't that real emotional connection and emotional needs being met. And so that was a big trauma for my inner child that needed to get dealt with, right? And so it's just, that process of realizing what those memories are, realizing what your human needs, back to Maslow, what your human needs were lacking back in your childhood, that's what you need to compensate for now. That's what you need to actually go and look into and figure out, oh, okay, I can give that to myself or I can create that for myself, right?
The problem is, and I've seen it around me with people that I know and even just people that I don't directly know, but you hear stories of and stuff like that. A lot of the people that have that type of trauma happen to them, they decide to fold. They decide that, you know what, woe is me, the universe hates me, God hates me, whatever the case is, I have no luck, everything is against me. And they tend to spiral into really, really bad places. And that's basically it for them. You know, there is no sort of shovel available for them to dig themselves out. So it's kind of interesting. And I like that about your story because you're somebody that had the trauma, had the reasons to sort of quit, not only from childhood in some sense, you know, because you could blame it all on that very easily, right? We live in a world now, and I know you're going to like as we kind of get into these topics, but we live in a world now where everybody's just sort of pointing fingers at everybody else and saying, it's not me, it's not me, it's them, and that's why. So it's cool to see that, man. I think that's really inspiring, you know?
Yeah, man, like massive accountability, like relentless accountability is the path because there's no power in blaming anything else, right? When you frame things as, oh, it's happening to me, everything's happening to me, you're just giving up your power. You give up everything just to blame other people, right? So I grew up around a lot of people who would just like give up. They just gave up. They're like, no, I can't do that. No. And I was like, fuck you. Like, I'm going to be the one that shows you that it's possible so you change. And that's all you can do, right? Is you can change other people by changing yourself. You show other people what you can do, what's possible given your circumstances. And then they say, oh, yeah, hang on, I can do it. Yeah. No way.
By the way, and that's making me think. So you mentioned like you had a bad friend circle and I guess you were sort of, maybe it was your energy actually and consciousness overall, depending which way you want to look at it. But basically you had a lot of dead skin around you, so to speak, at a time, right? And then how did you shed that? Was it because you started changing and they sort of didn't know how to react to it, and they started probably saying, hey, you know what, like, what are you trying to do? This isn't you. This is not the guy we know. Was it a lot of that stuff? Like, how did you break away from the dead skin? I feel like a lot of people are held back, and that's a big thing.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's identity level change, man. So like when you change the way that you see yourself and perceive yourself, nothing else matters. No one's perception of you even matters. So that's always what I did. When I wanted to change, going from, socially isolated, kind of like lightly autistic nerd, someone who was like super social and I would talk to anyone. When I did that, it was just a reframe in my mind. I created a new identity and then I stepped into that, right? So I figured out what characteristics, what kind of energy that person had, and then I stepped into it. And then when I got this group of people around me, I had all these fake friends, like hundreds of people at these parties and stuff, but I still felt alone. I realized that I was still holding on to a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of apathy that I needed to release in order to move past those people, because you attract the type of people that you are, no matter what. So if you're surrounded by people who are bringing you down, it's like, well, you're probably bringing yourself down, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So change that mindset, right? Like build yourself up, change your self-talk to the point where you know you're the shit and you know that you're on a journey to get better and better, and that the people around you are bringing you down. So you kind of maybe need to distance yourself from them so that you can build yourself up and then go back to them and be like, hey, look what I've done. Let me help you.
I like that you said that too. And I find that sort of interesting because, on this path, I've seen, I've even experienced myself. It's sort of when you get into this mind state and you have this almost second birth in a weird fucking way, to be honest, right? Because there's the old you and how you used to see life and all the shit that came with that. And then once you kind of step into this level of awareness, you start to look at the world differently. You start to look at people around you differently, and you almost don't want to be around certain things anymore. It's repulsive. It's almost off-putting, and you're unable to, almost like on a physiological level. And you start craving a whole different set of energy levels and people that bring that sort of energy. But the one thing that I'm wondering is, because it's difficult, obviously, to make these sort of drastic changes that are required, and most people that take action, they do it based on either extreme amount of faith or conviction or something, or knowing there's a guarantee of something waiting for them on the other side of this. But there's no guarantees. And that's the truth. And a lot of people get in their own head because they haven't seen it happen yet. And so because of that, what they'll do is not take action, and they'll sort of stop before they even start. So what are some of the tools and things that you mentioned about discipline and all those other things that you said that helped you sort of get to that place of rebuilding your confidence and starting to see the end goal a little bit better?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of surrounding yourself with the people who are actually doing better than you in different aspects. Because what one man can do, another man can do, right? We've heard that before.
Yeah.
But when you actually see it in action and you see these people, it really cuts deep. Like you get a deep understanding of, oh, wow, that person is just like me and they're a millionaire. Wow, that's crazy. That person's just like me and they have that hot 10 out of 10 girlfriend. Wow, that's crazy. How do I do that? So it's just actively seeking out people who are similar to you, but have better results in some areas of life. And then convincing yourself, well, I guess that's possible then, right? Because that's what visualizing is as well, is just seeing someone similar to yourself do something at a higher level. It convinces your subconscious mind that it's a possibility. And then you say, oh, I guess I could do it. Yeah, actually. So what I did was, when I was living in Vegas, I would go to these big parties with millionaires, with supermodels, 10 out of 10s, like all of this stuff.
Sounds awesome.
I surround myself with all these people, like entrepreneurs, business owners, and I was super young. I was like 17, 18, but I knew that I had to get around those people because I wanted to learn from them. I wanted to learn how they kind of carry themselves, what their habits are, what they do. And none of that actually mattered at the end of the day. It wasn't what they do. It wasn't the habits they have. It wasn't the people that they even know. It was just the level that they're at in their mind. That's all it is, right? So that was what taught me, wow, maybe I need to level up my mind to get the results that I want.
Is there any sort of, like, are you into reading books? Is there any sort of specific behavioral patterns that you've had to adjust into that are different from what you were doing before that sort of promote this mind state, that promote you to continue on this path and journey that you would say others should kind of look into?
I always advise against reading books, just
really
books.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've read a lot of books. I've read hundreds of books, but I advise against reading books just to read books. You want to read books to find the solution to your current bottleneck. That's all. Because that's all that matters. You basically cultivate the awareness to find your bottleneck, find what's holding you back in your life right now from where you want to be, and then you aggressively try to find a solution to it. That's all. That's all a book should be, really. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in all the religious books like the Tao Te Ching and the Bible and the Quran. They all have a lot of these answers, but the intention behind reading a book is all that matters. I see a lot of people reading books just to flex it on social media, or read books just to get their book a weekend. It's like, fuck you. Stop reading, start taking action. Why are you not taking action? The only reason behind mindset coaching, the whole point of mindset coaching, is just to get you to take the action that you know you need to take, right? Like, what is holding you back from doing that? And it's the same thing with reading. Reading is just a bunch of concepts laid out in a different way so that your mind can hopefully get some clarity so that you can take the action that you want to take. That's all.
Makes total sense. And I think, yeah, I'm on the same page as you with that. Like, I read a lot, but I'll tell you this, I never read fiction. I don't give a shit about fiction. I'm not into reading about stories. Like, I'm reading to learn something that I can then use and apply in day-to-day life, whether it's like some of the stuff in the books that you mentioned, like more on a personal sort of spiritual level, business, whatever the case is, right? Knowledge really is power, but without action, it's useless. It's like literally a gun without a bullet. What's the point, you know? But
yeah. There's one thing with fiction books. I don't read fiction books much, but there is a benefit to reading them, which is that you're cultivating and strengthening your imagination, your ability to imagine, which is really important in visualizing your future and what outcomes you actually want. Because people who start out with like journaling or visualizing, like, these things work, but you need to have a strengthened imagination. Because when you first go to sit down, I remember when I started visualizing, I like wrote down where I wanted to be, that sort of shit. And I was like, okay, let me just try to envision it. And I couldn't. My thoughts were just racing. I was thinking about random stuff and I couldn't actually picture what I needed to picture. But through strengthening that imagination muscle, that's a really powerful way to visualize your future. So it's not just useless. There is a little bit there, but yeah, I do like the nonfiction more.
Oh, for sure. But I get what you mean, though. It's true. Like, when I got it, so I meditate as well. I haven't in a minute, I'll be honest about that. But there was a period where I was doing this thing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. You should check it out, though, if you haven't heard of it. It's called Guided Manifestation Meditation. Sounds stupid, but this one particular video on YouTube I came across, it's like 10 minutes. Some chick is talking and she's guiding you through it, sort of like meditating for idiots, right? Because when I grew up and I would hear about this idea and all these billionaires were sort of doing it, like, if you read their story, a lot of successful people always say, oh, it's because of meditation, right? And so I was like, okay, let me try this. But what do you do when you don't know what to do? Like, when you hear the word meditation, you're just like, okay, do I just sit on my fucking hands? And what am I supposed to do, you know? But this was a really good video. And then you start to visualize, but more importantly, like you said, you get those weird thoughts, and that's just a reflection because we don't actually spend time alone thinking with ourselves. It's all day long, us getting external inputs all day, like on a mental level, all day through walking life, you're interacting or you're digesting something from some sort of media or whatever. And so those are all inputs that are either going to your subconscious mind and they're sort of programming you. But when you meditate, you have time to really start to think, to analyze, and more importantly, see into the future as to where you want to be. I find the whole thing kind of trippy, to be honest with you, because it makes you feel like we do sort of live in this simulated matrix in a sense. How is it possible that if I start fucking thinking of something, then somehow, like, the concept of manifestation in itself is trippy, right? Like,
yeah.
But apparently it works. And yeah, it's a bunch of interesting shit. What do you think, since we covered all that, by the way, and I know I've seen you post a bunch of different things, and I want to cover as much as possible because I know you have some interesting takes and stuff like that. What do you think some of the issues and challenges the world's facing right now on any level, but something that specifically sort of stands out to you in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. I love talking about this stuff because the mainstream media, right? Everyone talks about the mainstream.
You know, it's going to be a fire take, by the way, when it starts with the mainstream media. I love it. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
People talk about being stuck in the matrix and the mainstream media, and these are the two buzzwords right now because the mainstream media instills fear into people, right? And so when you look at, say, you look at a chart of a map of consciousness, right? So you can look this up. Look up map of consciousness chart, and they're really good, or emotional spectrum chart, they're similar. When you look at that, you see fear on the bottom. You see fear down low. And so a lot of the world is just stuck in a fear mindset. They're scared of things happening. They're really reactive, and they're in competition, right? They're in competition with each other. It's win-lose. Everyone's out to get me. It's animalistic. You're basically like a cat. Like my cat acts like that, how most people act. It's like, oh, shit. Oh, fuck, what was going on? It's like, that's low level. That's low level. So basically the biggest problem that humans face right now is they are stuck in that loop and they don't even want to get out of it. They're addicted to those lower frequency emotions like fear. They're addicted to fear. They're addicted to being angry because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel better than what they're actually feeling deep down, which is despair, depression, apathy, anxiety. They don't want to feel that. So what's more powerful than those emotions? Fear, anxiety, or anger. These type of emotions are higher frequency. They're more strong emotions. And so people just fluctuate between those two. And they never actually accept what they're feeling deep down, which is maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I'm guilty about something. Maybe I'm in shame. People don't accept that. They want to run away from it. Like, oh no, my shame, oh, push that down. Oh, push down my guilt. Oh, don't want to think about that. It's like, no, that's fine. Let it be there, recognize it, and let it dissipate. Because that's the only way that you get through it, is by actually accepting it as it is and not being a bitch about it. Like, not bitching away from your emotions, right? Like, yeah. And men need this so much because a lot of people who talk about this emotional spectrum stuff, they'll be like, oh, just love yourself and let go of your emotions. Like, fuck that. Don't be a bitch about your apathy. Don't be a bitch about your guilt and shame. Like, accept it and love it and express it and let it go. So it doesn't need to run you anymore, right?
How does one do that, though? When you say, first of all, let's back up for a second. So you hit on a bunch of key points. It's interesting that you said that because, yes, I do think there's a high level of escapism, and this is our addiction to, like, the news cycle and just all the stuff that's going on. I admit, like, for me, I don't actually think it's a form of escapism for me, but I just genuinely am interested in the shit that's going on in the world. I'm very curious. So I don't know if that necessarily may apply to me. But I know for many others, they'll say, well, I didn't do that because the stock market's crashing, or I didn't do that because World War III is around the corner, So they start to sort of use it as a way to sort of blame their lack of results on other external shit. And that's interesting that you said that. But on the emotional side of things, right? So that's interesting because you have two camps today, right? You got camp one, because males are in this very sort of weird place now. Back in the day, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we sort of had an assigned role in the sense of everybody knew what a man, quote unquote, was supposed to do, handle their emotions, all this sort of shit. Nothing was up for debate. Nothing was up for, picking it apart and saying it should be this way or that way. So now you've got two camps. You've got camp one, which is basically, express yourself, be no different than the way a woman expresses her emotions. It's okay. Like, come to your woman with all these emotions, stuff like that. And then you've got camp two, which is turn that shit the fuck off, man up, you're the captain of the ship, no emotions, no fear, nothing. And if you're dying inside, then keep that shit inside. So How do you, like, which camp are you more in line with, in your opinion, and why?
Neither. Not. They're
really
stupid. Like, they're both
okay.
They are both bullshit. And it's always the same with everything. Like, if you are in one of those camps, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you're a conservative or liberal, if you're this or that, you are dumb. Like, there's no other way around it, because there's truths to both sides, right? And you need to realize that, okay, back in the day, sure, everyone just stuffs their emotions down. If you're a man, just stuff it down and don't worry about it. But even before that, the people who really excelled are the ones who get altitude on their emotions. They don't stuff them down. They notice them, but they're above them, right? They realize that they're there, but they don't let them run them, right? They fully allow them to be there.
How do they process it in a healthy way, right? Because this sort of goes into the dynamics of relationships and stuff like that. I know you're probably interested in the topic. I know we've gone back and forth on Instagram and shit a little bit. We've seen some stuff. So again, like, what is the right way for a man, quote unquote, to process their emotions? Because obviously not processing it, stuffing it down, I mean, probably not the healthiest thing you could sort of do. It's got to go somewhere. It's energy at the end of the day. But in your opinion, what is the right way to sort of deal?
Yeah. So men these days don't understand how to actually process emotions properly. They either stuff them down or they express them like a woman, right?
Right.
It's neither. You need to transmute your emotions. Men need to transmute emotion. Every single emotion that you have is just energy in the body. And you can frame it in your mind as any type of energy that you want. A really good example is when you're feeling nervous. When you're feeling nervous about, say, you're going to, speak on stage or something, that energy you can reframe as excitement instantly. If you tell yourself, instead of telling yourself, I'm nervous, oh my God, I'm scared, you tell yourself, I'm excited. That feels the same in the body, and all you're doing is reframing it. So that's what men need to do for all their emotions. They figure out what they're feeling and they notice it fully, all of the sensations that occur with it. Say it's a tingling in the chest or in the throat or something. They notice that, and then they allow it to be transmuted into something else. Sex energy is a big one as well that I struggled with, which was just, I felt like when I was out, I'd see women and I'd be like lustful and things like that. And I needed to transmute that energy, right? Instead of having it all be, built up and I'm resisting it. I'm like, oh no, don't want to be like that because I have a girlfriend or whatever. Instead, I transmute it. So I visualize, basically close my eyes. You can do it with your eyes open, but you visualize where those sensations are occurring. And then you bring them up back through your spine, and you just imagine this happening. You imagine it coming out through your spine, going down the front of your body and just dissipating. And like, it seems really like woo-woo and spiritual and weird to do this shit, but it's like, it actually works because it's all mental. It's all a big mental game. And when you do this enough, when you practice doing that and transmuting your emotions, eventually you can just do it on demand. You do it in a split second, and then it doesn't need to even have that process. So it's just the practice of that.
And then what? That's just sort of a visualization of dumping the energy in a different place or letting it flow out of your body in a certain specific way, that kind of thing. See, the fact that you're saying all this shit, like anybody listening that's not familiar, and by the way, you're right, because I've read that in a couple books. I don't know if you're familiar with The Way of the Superior Man. Really cool book. If you haven't read it, you should check it. Have you read it?
Yeah, it's data.
Exactly. Yeah. So he talks a lot about this and how to sort of deal with energy, and then also like the concept of polarity, which is super important and a big problem that I'm personally seeing today that we're sort of not understanding, that a high quality relationship requires that polarity. So the idea that men and women are somehow the same, it's not about how you feel about it from like a political standpoint. It's literally counter biology. You want to elaborate on that? Because I'm sure you're familiar with this concept.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's men and women who have different energies, right? There's men who are more feminine, there's women who are more masculine, but at the end of the day, women in general are more feminine and men are more masculine. But what does that actually mean? What is feminine and masculine? They're just different poles, right? So that's why really feminine men are not as attractive to really feminine women, right? It needs to have that polarity. So what's happening in America, especially, is crazy because a lot of men are becoming super feminine. They're basically women, right? And the women essentially have to compensate for that by becoming really masculine. They have to take on the job roles. They have to take on that masculine energy. And so Americans are just evening out to where they both have like the same amount of male energy and female energy, and there's no attraction, right? So I don't think that there's a major issue there because the people will just stop repopulating, right?
Right.
It's like, if they're not in attraction with each other, it's going to stop repopulating. So at the end of the day, it's like, evolution, survival of the fittest. They're just going to.
Absolutely, 100%. But I think what happens is that it sort of leads us into this world now where, and again, we can go far with this shit because I know you're into it, but like the way I look at it, man, like the value proposition in things like marriage and things like dating and things like monogamy, like in this current modern world, does something like that even exist? Is it possible? I'm not saying it doesn't, but the probability of it existing and then the way the future sort of unfolds with that in the background and the shit that we see, what does the world look like in 10, 15, 20 years? What does the dating world look like, right? Because we know if we look 20 years ago, it's vastly, vastly different compared to today. What the fuck does 20 years from now look like, Yeah.
Especially with AI coming. It's crazy because the mixture of men becoming more feminine and AI women becoming a possibility is like, well, the men are just going to buy these AI girlfriends, not repopulate. They're going to be lonely and depressed as fuck, and they're going to hate their lives. They're going to think that it's the solution. They're going to think that AI girlfriends are their solution, but it's probably not going to do the trick.
I mean, and I would say nothing beats the real thing. I can't even imagine how it could come close. But then you look at movies like that movie, Her. I'm not sure if you've seen it. If you haven't, you should watch it. Have you heard of this movie? So it came out a while ago. It came out in 2013. And at the time, it was like super forward because it was this guy. It was Joaquin Phoenix, I want to say. That's the main character. He's like this nerdy guy, just goes through a terrible breakup with his wife. And this kind of takes place, I would say, almost like now or closer to 2030. They don't give you a specific time frame, but so they have this Siri-like sort of device. You put it into your ear like an AirPod, and it has this like phenomenal AI built into it, played by Scarlett Johansson. So just imagine the voice and shit, like easy to follow up, but it's super amazing, right? Like it's incredible. It's literally communicating with him as if it was a real woman, and all day long she's just like doing all the things that a guy would want and seek in a woman. So naturally over time, he falls in love. And so the question is, if we sort of evolve into this reality now, because I'm sure you've seen the type of content that I've seen where the truth is, and I think stats actually support this, but like 20 to 30% of men today in this society currently are fucking invisible to women, right? Would you agree with that, by the way?
Yeah. Okay. If not more.
If not more. And that stat is only going to that number is going to become bigger. And the reason it's becoming bigger is because you're having a disparity, and it speaks to this broader trend of like the haves and have-nots and the economic background of what's going on. The guys that sort of have the status, they're the ones that are getting the vast majority of the women, whereas, the guys that don't have the status, all of a sudden they sort of become invisible. But because men like women based on the way that they look, women promote themselves on things like Instagram and TikTok and with filters and shit like that. Just the vast exposure of a girl that, might have been from Ohio 15 years ago, had no visibility to the global dating marketplace, all of a fucking sudden, thanks to Instagram, even if she's the hottest girl in Ohio, but not the hottest globally, she's getting attention. And it just takes one guy in Miami or whichever place to say, hey, let me fly you out. Bam. She's taken out of that market and she's put into the other market. 20 years ago, she would have married the captain of the football team, most likely. You know what I mean? Because the social media stuff sort of didn't exist. And so a lot of these guys now are losing to the top end guys, and they're sort of becoming invisible. And as that market grows and AI gets better and loneliness, which is only going to become a progressively larger problem, yes, 20, 30 years from now, who the fuck knows? And it's not like before because we're not as needed by women as much anymore. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. They're self-sufficient. They're fucking working, obviously, and have wonderful careers in many cases. And in some other crazy cases, having, they're literally becoming men. So it's weird. It's weird, you know?
Here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Status doesn't actually mean anything. In the sense that we think of status as like looks or money, that's not actually status to women. What's actually status to women is whether you're able to be authentically expressive of yourself without any fear of judgment from other people. So if you have no shame around what you're doing and you're still in touch enough with everyone around you to where you're not socially like weirdo, then women will love you more than a person who's rich.
Okay, this is good.
Here's the thing, right? I've been in situations where I had no money in my bank account.
Yeah.
I looked terrible. I was wearing literally a pink suit, pink shorts, pink shirt, just walking around.
Okay.
Right? And there were literal millionaires that I was competing with at the club, basically.
Yeah.
And what happened was I walked up, not giving a single fuck, while these guys are like, oh yeah, I'm trying to impress, you know, I got all this stuff. This is going to make her like me because I got my Rolex on and I got my diamonds. Like, and I just walk up and I clown the fuck out of them. And I'm like, is that real, bro? Like, what are you doing? And
yeah.
I'm just super like in my own energy, right? Like I don't give a fuck. I'm just self-entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And that gets all the attention. The women like that because that's real, that's authentic. And that's,
but it's also confidence. And that's the key. And that speaks to, okay, we mentioned polarity earlier. So polarity would mean you have opposites. And in having opposites, you can only have one leader and one follower, right? You can't have both being leaders. So somebody that's confident, that sort of shows and projects in a very subconscious way to the viewing person or the person perceiving that person that, hey, this person might know where they're actually going. And I'm not so sure if I know where I'm going. So I'm going to follow that person. And for women, especially just because of how things have sort of evolved throughout time, from primitive times to now, they want to sort of, I'm not saying it's exclusive, God forbid, I don't want to be called misogynist or anything. I don't even care, actually, fuck that. But like, I talk to women and I ask the question because I find the topic super interesting. But the truth is, most of them will say, yeah, I don't want to make decisions and I don't want to decide where we're going, what we're doing. I don't want to make the plans. I prefer to follow, but the person I'm following has to display confidence and competence that they're able to lead. And that's the key. And so the guys that are confident, if that's their base layer foundation as an offering in the mating world, that's a phenomenal step. Because like you said, the rich guy probably may not have confidence. He might be so busy working 24/7 that he lacks sort of social interactions. And so he doesn't understand people, how to communicate and all that other shit. And so I agree with you on that. But the problem is, again, confidence as a character trait, if we're looking at ourselves as avatars in sort of this matrix reality, if we're playing a video game, confidence is something that will most likely lead to success. Because the same way you walked in with all the pink and not giving a fuck, it takes that same level of crazy to be like, yo, I have a fucking idea about a business. And even though 10 people told me I'm nuts, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do it, you know? And so that's what I would connect it to. But the problem now becomes what happens when men are no longer comfortable because they're losing confidence, because they're sort of taking a back seat when it comes to decisions, because we're now being told that we're equal. So once society evolves out of that, and women start to, if you pay attention, I don't know, again, Australia is different. Maybe it's not. I would argue all major cities kind of have this sort of same thing happening. But if you pay attention to things, and again, it's not exclusive, but if you notice more women today are making decisions. I noticed that. And that's not a bad thing in the sense where they shouldn't make decisions. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we got to go in alignment. A big part of what you do, from everything I've heard you say, is you sort of help people understand themselves for the sole purpose of creating alignment in their lives, because you didn't have it before you came back to Australia. That was the problem, and that was why I think you felt all the friction that you felt. And it's only when you found and figured out, okay, this would be alignment for me, that everything sort of opened up for you. Think about all the shit you said. I listened and I think it's awesome, but now all of a sudden it's a 180 from where things were. Why? Because now you're in alignment with your true self. How? because you took time to figure it out for yourself. You detached from all the external inputs that you've been dealing with your whole fucking life, and you started to listen to yourself, and you're finally giving yourself what you actually need. That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You're spot on, man. And like, that's confidence, really. Confidence just comes from doing the things that you know you should do. And you can't even figure out what those things are until you're present enough and undistracted enough to hear that voice.
Do you think that voice only, because here's the thing, man, I actually think your story and anybody that's had hardship and sort of struggled and fucking failed, all that stuff is a great, wonderful blessing. That to me says you're chosen, whether it's by God, the universe, whichever way you want to look at it. Because if those moments don't happen and you're never put in a position where you're like, God damn it, I never want to feel that feeling again, like whether it's being broke, whether it's being heartbroken, whatever, any one of these terrible things that you could say could cause, pain and suffering. If you don't have those moments, you'll never do the self-audit that you need to do to sort of figure out the issues that you're having. And so the people that coast through life and sort of what from the outside world, maybe when you were your old self, when you were actually experiencing the problems, again, back to perception, like you were saying, I bet back then there was a time when you were looking around you and you're like, that guy doesn't fucking know anything about what's going on. Why is everything so easy and simple for that motherfucker? I don't understand. I'm out here suffering. I'm trying to figure it out, but it seems so easy for them. It's not that it's easy. We all have a level of potential that we can hit. And the people that don't have the problems, I feel that they're never going to extract their full potential because they're not being pushed towards it. But then looking at society today, it's troubling, man, because we're telling people that problems are bad. We're telling them that challenges are bad. We're doing shit like participation trophies, and we're telling it's okay, don't worry, like, here's a safe space, don't trigger me, microaggressions and all this shit. Like, life will never be easy, and it's not supposed to be easy, because if it is, you're living a weird dream or you're getting hustled or some crazy shit like that,
Yeah, like, what's the point? If it's all easy, then what's the point? Like, you just get complacent. If you get to the point where everything's easy, then you start to go downhill, right? So you got to constantly be putting adversity in front of yourself, even at the highest level. Like the people that I talk to who are, millionaires, decamillionaires, they have the same things. They have the same processes in place that challenge them every single day in whatever area of life they want to excel in, right? It's like bodybuilders. Like they just get really big and then stop going to the gym. They keep going because they got to keep progressing a little bit. If you're not progressing, you're regressing.
100%. And it ties us back to the beginning. So think about this. And it's fucked up. It's weird. I talk to people and then I can sort of make connections when I hear them say the things that they say. So here's my connection for you. You used to be a gamer, right?
Yeah. Big time. Okay. 12 hours a day.
Now imagine really, that's fucking insane.
Yeah.
I could get into that in a second too. But when you were a gamer, I think what kept you playing for 12 hours a day is because it was challenging. And the challenge is what kept you going, because at the end of those challenges, you could win the game. And the win felt a lot better because you had to get through that sort of adversity. Now you leave gaming, but at the same time, you've now applied the same strategy, philosophy, and outlook to your actual life, real life. So that's kind of interesting. I like that.
Yeah. It's the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And so I've pretty much always just chased that feeling of like dopamine and validation in everything that I did, which limited me a lot. And it's something that I have to be conscious about every single day, is just, not trying to be better than other people, but just trying to be better than myself last week or last month or last year. That's the only way you can compare yourself, because everyone's been through different circumstances and has different thoughts and different genetics. And so it doesn't make any sense to compare yourself to other people. The only validation you should get is the validation of your own daily actions every single day. That's all.
Absolutely. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of people face. And yeah, you know what, man? I think everybody has to find their breaking point. Chase obstacles, chase difficulty, because if you happen to be leading a life in which you start to hit those roadblocks, that just means that there's a lot of potential you're sort of leaving on the table, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't meet those roadblocks and you wouldn't have them happen to you. But what would you say before we sort of leave things off here, like for somebody that might be watching, listening, sort of spiraling, going down the wrong path, and in the back of their mind, they're sort of like, man, I love this guy's story and saying all the right things, but I'm out here fucking stuck in this situation. How do they get going? What is the first thing that they could do to sort of get that immediate reward or dopamine burst to put them into the right direction, so to speak? What does that look like?
The first thing that you can do to start an upward spiral from a downward spiral is just to do one thing. Just the one most important thing that you can think to do, one simple, tiny, minuscule thing. Even if that's make your bed, even if that's brush your teeth, just something that's like progressing you, something that helps you long term, longer than just now. Get out of that frame of, I need validation now, I need dopamine now, and just do something that helps you a week later, helps you a day later. One thing like that, compounded again and again and again in every moment, is how you spiral up.
Amazing. And by the way, so again, because I want to send as many people your way, I think this journey and path and direction you're heading in is awesome. Actually, one more question. I like to ask this of people. What do the next 5 years look like for you? I know it's hard to plan and map it out, but if you could answer that today based on where you're at and your perspective now, what does that look like?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've got it pretty much all mapped out the way I see it going. Me and my girlfriend do a lot of future kind of pacing work and stuff like that. But I definitely want to move to the Gold Coast. I'm living in Perth right now. I want to move to the East Coast, somewhere kind of tropical. I started my online businesses now, so I can travel. Definitely want to travel around the world over the next couple of years and just help as many people as possible while doing that. I'm going to do some public speaking stuff as well. Hopefully get a few gigs around the place in different cities, and really just help as many people as possible. I want to coach 100 people over the next year and a year or two, and really just impact as many people's lives as possible. And that's my only motivation, really. My only end goal is just to stick to my daily habits that I know I need to do every single day to get to the place that I want to be at, which isn't, I want to have a mansion and have a Lamborghini and all that. Like, that'd be nice. That's great. But that's a result of the work. That's a result of how many people I impact. So my only real goal is just to benefit as many people's lives in as much depth as possible in the next 5 years.
That's amazing, man. And honestly, I hope people take in all the gems that you've dropped. And what's the best way for people to find you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, Instagram's the big one. At Spencer Hosking on Instagram. I post a bunch of reels on there, that mindset stuff, and that's the main one. I've also got YouTube, where I do kind of a few videos a week, just ranting. I just hop on the camera. I literally just front the camera there, and I'm like, bam, it just comes to me, and I just spew it out. So there's a lot of gems in there as well.
Yeah, I've noticed, and I love it, man. And I'm wishing you all the best, and I can't wait to see the rest of your journey unfold. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way. It was a blast. And hopefully we'll do it again sometime in the future when you've got those 100 people that you're coaching under your belt, and we can start talking about the next 5 years after that.